Tervetuloa tänne. Ja tässä on Dee Kyne, joka on tullut tänä päivänä puhumaan meille. Sitä, mitä tiedän hänestä, sitä vähän, mitä tiedän hänestä, mulla oli kunnia tutustua hänet eilen. Ja tervetuloa. Ja sanotaan niin pähkinäkuoressa hän ajatteli, että hän haluaa muuttaa hänen omaa elämänsä. Eli hänen matkansa alkoi virallisesti huhtikuun 26. päivä tänä vuonna. Ja hän kävelee eri puolilla maailmaa ja yrittää sillä tavalla yhdistää erilaisia voimia, että he voivat saada aikaa muutoksia. Ja hän puhuu paljon tämmöistä ecocide. Tiedätte suicide, genocide. Ja hän puhuu ecocide, mikä on sitten kuinka murhaamme meidän ympäristömme. Ja hän halusi puhua siitä asiasta. Mutta yksi tärkeä ihminen, ketä mä halusin tuoda tänne esille, ja joka kertoo vähän tätä koko matkaa. Muistatko tämmöinen sanonta, oliko se näin, että ei ole päämäärä tärkeä, mutta se matka? No, mä uskon, että tämä on vähän niin kuin Dee Kynen tarina, mutta Niko Tamminen, voisitko kertoa sinä vähän, mistä tämä matka alkoi? Tervetuloa tänne sitten. Kuka sinä olet?
Terve, eli olen Niko, lukio-opiskelija. Aloitin tässä viikko sitten lukio-opiskelijana. En odottanut, että pääsen puhumaan tänne tänään. Nyt vähän jännittää. Tapasimme, Deen kanssa tavattiin Espanjassa, tarkemmin sanoen Pyreneillä, sillä Espanjan puolella. Hän oli vasta aloittanut kävelemään matkansa tätä Santiago de Compostelan pyhiinvaellusreittiä kulkeen, jota itse oli jo siinä vaiheessa kulkenut joku 7,5 kilometriä. Eli tapasimme siellä. Miten liityimme yhteen oli, koska mulla oli vähän jalat kipeät, loukkaantuneena. Dee käveli kavereiden kanssa hitaasti. Ja okei, otin hihasta kiinni ja voinko tulla teidän kanssa, ettei tarvitse yksin tuolla mennä menemään. Ja sitten siitä jatkamme matkaa jatkoi 6 viikkoa. Anything else?
No, kiitoksia paljon. Mutta näetkö te, että monesti mitä mä puhun Dee Kynen kanssa ja Nikon kanssa on sitä, että uskomme, että emme pystymme muuttamaan mitään meidän ympäristössä, koska olemme niin pieniä ja emme pystymme vaikuttamaan mitään. Mutta uskon, että näin ei ole asia. Me pystymme vaikuttamaan hyvin paljon meidän ympäristömme ja tällä tavalla. Vai mitä Niko, mitä sä ajattelet?
No, tähän voisin laittaa yhden pienen lainauksen, jonka kuulin tästä aikoinaan tästä pienuudesta. Että miten pieniä voidaan olla ja voidaanko saada muutosta aikaa. Että jos sitä joskus tuntuu, että olette liian pieniä ihmisinä tai olentoina saamaan minkäänlaista muutosta aikaa missään, niin voitte miettiä, oletteko koskaan ollut samassa huoneessa yötä itikan kanssa.
No sitten oli tämä kysymys, mitä se itika ajattelee sinusta? Mut kiitoksia Niko. Joo. Onko yhtään kysymyksiä haluatte tehdä, Niko? Okay. No kiitoksia Niko. Ja oikein hieno juttu, että olet tuonut Dee Kyne tänne Otavan opistoon. Varmasti on suuri kunnia kuunnella hänen mielipiteitä ja ajatuksia. Okei, hän nyt puhuu meille englannin kielellä. Te kaikki osaatte englantia hyvin, eikö niin? Joo. Ja mä oon pystynyt Dee Kyne, että hän puhuisi englantia hitaasti, ei niin nopeasti, okei? Okay? Jos on jonkun sana, jotka te ette ymmärrätte, tai jonkun ajatuspätkä, joka oli vähän vaikea, pysäyttäkää ja kysykää sitten. So I just said that basically that you'll speak a little bit kind of like slow, not I mean really slow, but just, in sort of like 60-70 kilometer per hour speed. Okay, just outside the city limits, and we're very happy to have you here. So I'll give the floor to you, and the audience
Thank
is all
you.
yours.
Thank you. Good morning. What a beautiful looking group of people are here. What an honour it is to be amongst you. And please, if I speak fast, just raise your hand so that I know to slow down. And it doesn't matter who I'm speaking too fast for, just help me. And if there's a burning question because of understanding that you need to ask right now, right then, do so. Because when you're listening in a language that isn't your own, sometimes you can lose your thoughts. So here I find myself, thanks to Nico, in your school, and when I was walking on the Camino, I had no idea that one day I would be standing in front of this splendid group of people, this extraordinary group of human beings who are here. So what I'm going to do first is share with you a little visual film that explains what ecocide is. Boom, in 2.5 minutes. Then I'm going to tell you about my crazy and interesting journey.
I recently met a corporate lawyer called Polly Higgins, and she said, "Let's eradicate ecocide." And I said, "Huh?" You know how there's an international criminal court that tries individuals for crimes against peace, right? Well, this court is in The Hague in the Netherlands, and their job is to bring to justice criminals who have committed international crimes, like for example genocide, which is the destruction in whole or in part of an ethnic, racial or religious group, or crimes against humanity, where one or more human beings have been systematically humiliated through murders, rape, torture and persecution, or war crimes when human rights have been violated during conflict, or even crimes of aggression, where one state violates the sovereignty and independence of another state through armed force. Well, imagine if the crime of ecocide, which occurs when the natural environment of a given territory is destroyed to such an extent that the survival of its inhabitants is threatened. Well, imagine if the crime of ecocide were to become illegal under international law. This is all very interesting, but what difference is this going to make? Well, imagine if heads of state and corporations were legally bound to put the well-being of people before profit. This would resolve many of our problems with pollution or the destruction of ecosystems and climate change. Yeah, that's great, but honestly, what do you think I can do about it? First of all, we aim to collect 1 million signatures from European citizens so that laws against ecocide can be discussed in the EU Parliament. The next step is to bring this law to the United Nations and have ecocide recognized as an international crime against peace. Then companies and individuals will be held responsible for destroying livelihoods of people and other living creatures. So tell your friends, share this video, use social networks and shout it off the top of a mountain if you like. End ecocide. But before you do any of this, please take 2 minutes to sign this petition to end ecocide in Europe, once and for all.
Thank you. Please note, endecocide.eu. And of course I will be handing things out at the end. So how did I get connected to this? And that's what I'd really like to share with you. You know, I had a life prior to walking around the world, which is what I'm doing right now, and traveling and journeying around the world. And I'd like to share some of that with you. I started life working in theatre as a lighting designer. And I worked all over Europe and the world. I used to go to Hong Kong lighting shows. And that was a very And then I became CEO, Chief Executive Officer of a big charity. By fluke. Somebody said, oh, you've done some arts work, you know how to paint as well, you could run this charity. And I thought, I'll give it a go. And that was great. And then I was asked to run a mental health company, because in the arts work, I had done some work with people with mental health. So I worked with the WHO, looking at how people who've had a mental health problem recover. And then I went back to the arts, painting, buying and selling art, and traveling around Europe and the world. And I got tired. I became a really good saleswoman. And I thought, but I wanted to be a painter, a thinker, and I became a saleswoman. So I stopped. And I went back to health. And this is where this story begins. I'm going to just get my slides up. This is me with more colour in my hair. And this is me as an award-winning CEO, Chief Executive Officer in health. I won many national awards for redesigning the way people received healthcare, to enable people to look after themselves better on their own terms, social change. And that's who I was up until 6 months ago. And still am, of course, but this was in London at the Grosvenor Hotel, having just been to Buckingham Palace to receive another award. Then the next day we were at the Grosvenor Hotel receiving a national award for change. This is the extraordinary team of people I worked with. And this is me, having got very stressed and strained and gone grey in a month, working in India. I spent the last 4 years working in India in health. And that work was about bringing primary health care, GPs, doctors, the doctor you see when you have a bad throat or a temperature, to communities who could not normally afford to go to doctors. And I'm sure some of you here who come from many different countries have experienced not being able to afford healthcare, and have experienced families who go into debt because they can't afford healthcare. So I thought I was doing quite a good job. I thought I was already changing the world. And this is in the middle of Delhi at a big news conference where we were about to go and challenge the Indian government to make big significant changes. And one of the things we did achieve was getting the Indian government, this team, we wrote a white paper about health in India, and it was taken to the Indian government, and it was one of the key influencing factors that got them to spend 1% more of their GDP. And the GDP is the amount of money that a country spends on its infrastructure. So a whole percentage more on health. So I was feeling quite proud at the time. So one day I went along to something on the side of my life. I'm deeply interested in the environment and what happens next. And I was at a meeting in a nice little town in Gloucestershire in the west of England, listening to somebody talk about ecocide, which I knew about and was involved in, but not very, a little bit involved. And I sat there and I felt like I had a big bucket of water poured over me. And I thought, I feel really uncomfortable. Not literally, but inside. And I felt like, wow, I've got to do some more. I have to do more stuff. So I realized that there was a sort of call-up for me, a call-up moment in my life. Whether it was divine, whether it was internal, your belief system is irrelevant here, but I had a moment where I had to do something very concrete. And I thought a lot about the people who come after us, the people who we leave this world to, our children's children's children. And I decided the most impactful thing I could do was to get up and start talking to people and meeting people and talking about the thing that I felt was the biggest game changer, which was to bring in a law that protects us from destroying our environment. And I'll come back to that because I'm not here to bang a drum. I'm actually here to meet you and find out who you are. And so this law to end ecocide was my response because I thought it was crunchy. It spoke to the things I have already known about. What I did discover was that in the corridors of power, where big people sit with big jobs, often their eyes are empty, and the real power in any room sits right here amongst us, amongst the people who make change, amongst young people, old people, but people who know how to do things. Some of you who've come from countries a long way away, you must be extraordinary because you got here. You must be extraordinary people. How resourceful does that make you? So when I worked with the Indian government and when I worked with the UK government, I found that there was very little power there because people are frightened when they're way up here. They don't like to reveal too much of themselves. They have to keep their jobs safe. They have to watch what the next guy or girl is doing. But the real power in any society is when people meet and they have a conversation and they know who each other is and they think less about themselves and more about the other people around them. So, there I was with my bucket of cold water over my head. How was this journey going to start? Well, it was going to start by me getting very focused on what I was going to do. I was going to walk to Santiago de Compostela and beyond, and that was my start. I was going to get training. So this was nearly 5 months ago now, and I've done a lot of walking and a lot of talking since then. This is the beginning of that walk. It's 790 kilometers and some, and then there's more because you have to walk to the end of Spain. And so I thought, I have to get fit, and it's a great way to meet people, and it's how I've ended up here in front of you. And it'll teach me what I need to do on this journey. I can never presume what a journey's going to be. So here's Nico, proving he was there, and a great Spanish friend of ours, Thomas Sanchez. So this journey became about people. So I'm going to show you some of the family photos of that journey, and then some of the other things I found, and tell you the story as I walked. So the road to Santiago de Compostela is peppered with fantastic pieces of sculpture. And this is what we all look like at the end of a day, collapsed in a heap, going into a hostel, if we're lucky, and not always a tent. This is what the road to Santiago de Compostela looks like. It's a long path. But for me, it was like a metaphorical, right, this is the beginning of my journey, the beginning of the journey that I'm going to take to change the world in my small, small way and to contribute to it for other people. Oh, wrong way. This is a story I want to share. Along the Camino, there are lots of experiences that happen, and which is why walking and thinking and taking time is worth doing. This was a day, see more sculptures. This was a day when Nico and I could hardly walk we were tired, we were walking along, everybody was going past us, and we were thinking, my God, they're so fast, they're so fit. We were both injured. So we sat down to eat our lunch, and we were eating avocado, and we thought, my God, let's see whether this snail likes avocado and see what the difference in the world can be like. So we fed this snail some avocado, and it loved it. It really loved. This snail was never so happy. So we introduced a whole new foodstuff. And then another snail came along, and we said, let's introduce more snails to avocado. They will love it. So we did, and they didn't like it. The next snail didn't like avocado. So we tried the next snail on tomato. We thought that was reasonable. It might like tomato if it doesn't like avocado. No, didn't like tomato. In fact, the second snail kind of turned its back on us. We tried it with many things, and it left sort of looking with disdain at this gluttonous snail who was eating the avocado. So what we learned from that was there's nothing more beautiful than looking at the small things in life, but also that even amongst snails there are many differences. Make of that what you will. So onward, we had more. Everywhere there was these sculptures were of the pilgrims, which gives you strength and makes you realize that there are people who've gone before you. It's a path filled with energy. Also, there's some very strange road signs, eco-mice, and strange things that you see along the way. Big trees to climb in, beautiful vistas, extraordinary stone circles, and amazing people. The one thing I learnt from bumping into different nationalities along the road to Compostela de Santiago was everybody is searching, and searching for an answer, whether it's in work, whether it's about learning, whether it's about just being a human being, whether it's a religious quest. And the opportunity to have those conversations with people just over a cup of coffee, to shift somebody's thinking, to inspire somebody in a small way, come along more often than we realize. And we often think we have to go out and do something big, like I think I'm doing right now, and I'm a bit mad. Or we can change the course of somebody's life just by being there, by hearing what they're saying, by listening to what they're saying. And you all know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But it's been brought home to me again and again and said to me by so many different languages and people. So here we have Germany, Australia, Ireland and Finland united on the road to Santiago. And here we have Norway and halfway mark, and this is Norway and Switzerland. Here we have Australia and Norway united, and I wanted to share with you the size of ice creams in León, in Spain. I just think it's an important thing for you to know about. They have really big ice creams, and as I know that everybody in Finland likes ice creams, I thought you might like to see that. This is one of the La Cruz, what's the cross called? Cruz de Fer, sorry, I went blank. This is one of the seminal landmarks on the Santiago path, which isn't so remarkable, but is because it's a huge hill, the size of this room perhaps, with the large cross on top, and the hill is made up of little gems, stones, rosaries, precious things belong to people, and it's made up of people's hopes, dreams and wishes. And you walk up that hill and find that you're standing on people's dreams and prayers. This is me looking very athletic. Cycling, we were injured at one point and had to cycle, and this is where I learned that cycling can be very painful. I'm just looking at a key cyclist here. And and hurts more than walking. And this is some of the vistas in the mountainous region on the way through Spain before we reached the flatlands, the Meseta, and reached Santiago. This is Santiago de Compostela. This is the big church. And there's Gandhi standing outside, which I thought was rather nice, outside this very opulent and big church. That's me greatly relieved that I made it to the end of Spain. And I'd like to just share with you how the story unfolded. So, walked 900 kilometers plus, and then headed towards Portugal. At the end of Spain is Galicia, and 10 years ago there was a big oil spill, and there was a boat called the Prestige. It spilt 77,000 tons of crude oil along this award-winning, World Heritage coastline. And it destroyed the livelihoods of thousands of people. But the government didn't pay for the cleanup, and nor did the oil company. The people who cleaned up the Prestige oil spill did so as volunteers, and they cleaned it individually, piece by piece, rock by rock, day by day. Many people got sick, and they had respiratory problems, so the people told us. Had there been a law to end ecocide in place, the people who are now going to court in 2013, the captain of the ship and the crew, wouldn't be the people in court. The government would be held responsible, as would the people who owned the boat, the oil company who filled the boat, and their responsibility ecologically would have been taken into account. I share that with you because these were the stories that we gather, and this is why walking and talking about ecocide is so important. And each of you know, wherever you come from, that these things are happening next door, close to you, and they affect all of us. This is my new look when I arrived in Portugal. And I went to Portugal straight after Spain to speak at a conference that was about the gift economy. And that was called Ajudada. Ajudada means gift. Means we came into this world free. We came into this world and we were given food by our parents. We were fed, we were watered, we had people who hugged us, and none of it cost us anything. We had land to walk on. It didn't cost us anything. The gift economy is looking at what makes people happy. How do they trade together? How do they trade when it's not a barter, you give me something, I give you something, but when it's just, yes, as a human being, it makes me happy. It makes me happy to give you something. And then one day you'll give it to somebody else. And how do we make business more aware and sensitive to working with people? And each and every one of you, who knows exactly what you're going to end up doing when you finish these studies and where it takes you? And those who teach these studies. So we went to a big conference. This conference had 500 people from all over Europe turn up to a town that had 50% unemployment. And that 50% unemployment was killing the town. So the conference's responsibility was a new and different way of responding, was to say to this town, what can we do to help? You have all these skills arriving, how can we help? So the deal was, the people in the town fed us and gave us places to stay, free. Everybody turned up for free. People sent coaches to Lisbon to pick us up and bring us to this little town in the middle of Portugal. And we ended up coaching, working with, all the local people came to the conference and had a lot of fun. And we left a building that had been painted, decorated, and was now a training centre in the middle of the village, town, and that had been donated by the mayor. So a lot of things happen along the way, and that taught me that this journey, and I learned, so this is where I spoke under a big 200-year-old plane tree, which was a nice venue, and hearing other people's stories. And what I discovered in Portugal was that it's about connecting each other to each other. So if you know of a great story, or you know somebody who's doing something really interesting, or somebody who's doing something, it's about us all connecting these strands. And what I've noticed since I've been here is that you're a very technologically orientated group of people who work online. And actually, even sharing with each other the differences and the things you do and all the skills you bring to a place are an extraordinary liberation. So I've gone on. I keep forgetting it's on. I have to pause it. So here I am talking. The reason I'm showing you this slide is because all those flags were made out of cut out advertising magazines from supermarkets. And the people of the town decorated it completely made out of newspaper and these magazines. So they didn't need the money to make something beautiful. These people I'm sharing with you because they too have given up all sorts of things, and they're starting to raise money for people who steward the earth. They don't have money. They sold their flats, apartments, and they bought land in Portugal, and now they're talking to big money guys in a way they've never done in their lives to raise money to set up a fund for people who are looking after the land in Europe. So I thought they were worth introducing to you, a little heart, as I moved to Sweden. This is Gotland. This was a great sculpture in Gotland, I thought. And Gotland is one of the biggest political gatherings in Europe. It's where all the political parties come together in Sweden, and on the same week, they're all together discussing how Sweden will evolve and develop. And it's a bit of a jamboree. I think it started with good intent, but has become, like all good things, after many years, a jamboree. So there are many ways of advertising what you're doing, and this was one of mine. That went on social media, which I'm just mastering. And at that event, some of these are 3 of the indigenous grandmothers who travel the world. There are 13 indigenous grandmothers from Nigeria, from Somalia, from China, from India, from Nepal, from the Amazon, and they were called together to travel and speak for peace. And they travel the world, sharing their original wisdom and the wisdom of their tribes, to also talk in a very contemporary way to us about how we can make plans for the future and the environment, but remembering some of the really old rules of the earth. So there I am with them, and we were speaking on Gotland to lots of young people and crowds who wanted to know about what their wisdom was, and also a challenge. It was a political challenge. So at that meeting, it was quite right-wing, actually, and there was quite a challenge, but it was interesting. This is a picnic. I said I was sharing family photos, but we're in a forest that was threatened. And on Gotland, there's an ancient forest called the Oinery Forest. You have some of these issues here, that's why I'm sharing them. And the Oinery Forest was designated a national park. But shortly after it was designated, there was a mining rights given to a company. And it was going to destroy, it's a very fragile water table. And if they started mining, people had no idea what would happen to the water table. There were also very many rare plants in the Oinery Forest. So there was a big battle. And these people, these very ordinary people, gave all their time to save this forest. And they now they won the battle. It was Goliath, David and Goliath. And they won the battle, but they've now got an 8-year stay of execution. So they now have to work out how to keep that forest safe. So mining is a really big issue. I also wanted to show you, so from Gotland we went to Stockholm, right into the middle of Stockholm. And these 13 indigenous grandmothers from across the world held a conference. And in that conference they put together indigenous wisdom with contemporary scientific thinking. So they would start work, the eldest of them was 89 years old. They would start work at 9 o'clock in the morning, hold a ceremony round a sacred fire right in the middle of Stockholm, and then they'd do that in the morning, at lunchtime, and in the evening. And in between, they held conversations. They brought in scientists, environmentalists, social thinkers, and they all talked, and we talked. And it was a conference with about 500 people present. So extraordinary things are happening in the world. This was another area we talked. This is where the Nobel Prize is given out. It's the City Hall in the middle of Stockholm. And this tree was dedicated to young people. And this tree is where young people can meet. And if they have a crisis or they want to call in elders, they can do so around that tree. And funding has been put there to support young people in their struggles. And there we spoke. And then we walked to a lake called Lake Vättern. As you can see, I'm getting closer to Finland now. And Lake Vättern is one of the deepest lakes, if not the deepest lake, in Sweden. It's one of the largest places for drinking water in Europe, the largest lakes for drinking water. And it's very, very deep. It's 130 meters deep. At the bottom of it, the water never changes, and there's nothing growing. Halfway up, the water starts to change and circulate, but it takes 62 years because that lake is not fed by rivers. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because at the moment, the Swedish government is dumping ammunition, spent ammunition from bullets and bombs into the lake. They are also fracking, looking for gas on the side of the lake, and on the other side they're mining. So this very beautiful lake, which if somebody dies and falls into the lake, they sometimes find that person in another lake. And the reason this has relevance in Finland is because it's so interconnected. The waterways, people don't fully understand those connections, this watery world, this beautiful, beautiful watery world in which you live. This huge resource that, like the Amazon, is like the water basin of the world, where the Amazon is the lungs. And these are things for people to start considering. So we walked to Vättern and we raised the profile and we walked with the people who were fighting to save Lake Vättern. We had a lot of news coverage, a lot of articles, and it did help because people started to think, oh my God, this is happening on my doorstep. I can't believe it. And really what we did was, again, gather people's stories. So this is Conchita Hörberg, who had also got a calling to walk for water and is part of forming a big environmental conference in Stockholm to which many people will be invited, and maybe your college can be connected. Because it's about a bigger thing. It's just about who you are in this world. It's not really just about the environment. That bit's a no-brainer. You don't destroy where you live. This is my young godson, Zach, he's 16 and he saved up all his money to come and walk with me in Sweden. So he came in from London and came and walked 120 kilometers to Lake Vättern with us. This is a picture near Lake Pula, your lake. And this is the beautiful lake, one tiny part of it, a man on a peaceful lake in Finland. And that picture is where the peat has now gone into the water, and water that was once really clear, crystal clear drinking water that you could see at the bottom, that you could see the crayfish, and you could see all the different fish, the perch. Now you can't see them. In places on the lake, it's so polluted with peat, with the cutting of the bogs, that you can no longer see the bottom of the lake, and many of those species have died. And this is a big threat in Finland. So I thought, well, the only way I can get to know Finland is to go and walk in the wilderness. So I did, thanks to some guidance from Nico. I went for a good few days, 4.5 days, and I didn't hear anything. I didn't see a moose. I was very upset. I didn't see a bear. I didn't see any wolves. I met a lot of mosquitoes, and I met a lot of ants. What I did discover is what a huge and peaceful, silent, beautiful place Finland is. And I realized part of knowing about Finland is understanding the silence of Finland and the bigness of nature and how truly beautiful it is at its best. And how much Finland means to the people of Finland, you know, that it's about, you know, your church is nature. And I learnt all of that. But I also learnt that there's an enormous amount of mining threatening. I heard about Talvivaara and met those people. And that these beautiful lakes around which you live are under enormous threat from fracking. And your hugest resource is water. Your most precious thing as guardians here, that you are, is the water of these lands, so they don't get poisoned. And at the moment, the green gold of the trees is now fading, and the gold of mining is not just literally gold, but the business of mining is becoming the high feature of Finland. So I met many ants. This, I couldn't believe, is over 200 years old, this ant colony. And I called it Beijing because it's so big. And I was trying to find Helsinki, you know, which would have been much smaller. And these enormous ant colonies must look like we do from afar. Busy, incredibly busy. But what are we busy doing, you know? And I couldn't work out what they were busy doing. I watched one ant take a leaf from right up at the top of this anthill and carry it for 15 minutes to the bottom. And he worked so hard, or she worked so hard, and she got it to the bottom, and you could see her put it down, and then she kind of went back up, and it was almost like she'd given up. What am I going to do? So this has been my journey, and what has come of it is that really what I've learned is, yes, I do talk about ecocide, and I do remind us that our environment is so important because it's about what we leave behind for generations. But actually, what I've become really is a matchmaker. So I'm introducing people in Sweden to people in Portugal and people in Finland to people in Sweden, and I've got all these threads where people are doing organic growing or setting up courses that are interesting to others, or they're going into business together. So I have 4 or 5 people who are now working in business together. In Portugal, I'm an advisor to the Citizenship Academy, who I'm going to introduce to all of you. And so actually what I've found is this is a conversation, and I would like to hear your stories, and I'd like to hear what you think about things. It's not about what I think. It's about the connections we make, each and every one of us as people, and what our stories are and the little things we do. And I'd just like to finish up with a very short tale about the most romantic plant in the world and how you can save the Baltic. It's a really simple act. The most romantic plant in the world is a seaweed. And in English, we call that seaweed bladderwrack. And it's the seaweed that looks like an oak leaf. It's like this. And it's got little things you can pop. Does anybody know the name in Swedish? What that seaweed is? Thank you. Thank you. In Finnish. Sorry, I meant Finnish. Forgive me. Yeah, but not really. We're kinda. Thank you. And so this seaweed only reproduces at a full moon. And at the same time that the seaweed reproduces, there's also a small, very tiny mussel. And out in the Baltic, the mussel is a huge mussel. It's this size, like this. At the edges of the Baltic, where the lakes and the Baltic meet, the brackish water, sweet sea and salt, sweet lake water and salt, they're like this, they're this size. But they're exactly the same. And the same with the seaweed. And this seaweed, because it only produces at a full moon, reproduces at the full moon, lays its eggs, the problem is that as all the farming effluent and all the rubbish from the lakes is going into the Baltic Sea, it's covering the rocks on which the seaweed reproduces at the full moon. So the biggest environmental thing you can do to change this world in which you live, a small, small act of kindness, is to, at the full moon, go out and scrub a rock and clean it and make it possible for a beautiful romantic seaweed to attach itself alongside some tiny, tiny mussels. And that at the edge of the Baltic or in lakes that meet the sea is a big act of environmental kindness and a small thing that people can do. And in fact would make a huge difference if everybody who lived in those localities did that. So I just thought I'd share with you romantic seaweed and small acts of kindness. And that's about it for my story. I put this sign up because it's covered in lichen. And I thought how marvellous in the middle of Jyväskylä to see a sign on a street covered in lichen that's made of plastic. And I'll leave you to make your own interpretations of that. So thank you very much for listening to my rambles. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk on some interesting terms like, siellä oli semmoisia muutamat aika tärkeät sanat, niin kuin ecocide, eikö niin? En tiedä, onko se tuttu teille, ja sitten tämmöinen gift economy, that's really interesting also. Ja tällä tavalla. Mutta nyt voidaan mennä semmoiseen vaiheeseen, missä te voitte niin kuin kysyä, niin kuin hän sanoi, että hän on kiinnostunut kuuntelemaan teidän tarinaa. Että tällä tavalla. I just told them that you'd be interested in hearing their story also.
I would, very.
Okay.
Go on, somebody tell me a story.
This is sometimes typical, sometimes in Finland it happens this way. People are a little bit shy. You know, I'm sure they have a lot of questions here they'd like to ask you. Someone.
Can I ask you...
Yeah, let me give you the mic here.
Just shortly, can I ask you where are you heading next?
Yeah, I'm going back to Sweden to work with some community groups who are involved in transition towns. And transition towns are where communities come together and you share and pool their resources. Back to Lake Vättern and then Holland, Germany, Austria and beyond.
Hei, muutenkin ei tarvii tehdä kysymys niin kuin englannin kielellä. Voitte tehdä suomen kielellä myöskin. Mä voin niin kuin, siis tulkkaa hänelle teidän kysymyksen. Mutta eikö ole hyvin mielenkiintoinen konsepti? Eli puhuttiin niin kuin, tämmöistä kansanmurhaa, eli genocide. Ja sitten puhutaan ecocide, eli jos tuotaan ympäristöä. Että siitä ei ole mitään jäljellä ja me pystymme edes elämään siinä enää. Aika mielenkiintoinen konsepti. Miri.
What did you call the 13 mothers? What was the word?
The 13, the gathering of...
the grandmothers.
Yeah.
And what do they do?
The 13 indigenous grandmothers have... And they come from different communities around the world and they travel and have done for the last 10 years for peace. for peace and humanity. So they speak social change, and they remind us of who we once were and how we used to plan things. And their biggest war cry is plan for the generations to follow you. You know, as some of the Native Americans say, plan for 7 generations to follow you. If we did that, we'd change everything. They have a website too.
Taru.
You also mentioned the lady who was walking for water. You were together in Sweden. Will you meet her again, and could you tell something more about her as well?
Yeah. Conchita Herberg is a singer, performer. She's a social activist. She works with a group who work called Awakening the Dreamer. Awakening the Dreamer, which is a movement, a worldwide movement, for all of us to think about how we wake up. And that's not a privileged position. That's about how do we become the best we can become. And she's walking to Lake Vättern again. She got injured on the first walk. But she's also going to be travelling around Sweden, and she's be coming to Finland and Norway. So she's going to hold the Scandinavian connection. So maybe I will introduce her to you. Yeah, thank you. I would like to ask a question, if I may.
Sure.
And I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but if there was one small thing you would do in your lives, what would it be? One small thing that you could do that would make a difference to the lives of the people around you. What would you, just in your own internal wisdom, share that with each other? I'd like to hear what your thinking is.
Eli hän kysyi, että mitä te voisitte tehdä, että voisitte saada jotain aikaa teidän ympäristössä. Ottakaa huomioon, että hän sitten jätti kaikki ja hän haluaa nyt kävellä ja saada niin kuin muutoksia aikaan. Mitäs te ajattelette siitä asiasta? Mitä voisitte tehdä? Tai ei voi tehdä mitään, eikö niin? Mennään kaikki nukkumaan. Ja, eikö niin? Sanot, että ei, heitetään sitten pyyhe sinne lattiaan ja me jaksaa. Tai mitä te?
Or are doing.
Sä oot sen näköinen, että halusit sanoa jotain. Mitä voisimme tehdä, että muuttaa asiat meidän ympäristössä? Sä oot nuori ihminen, sulla on koko elämä edessä.
Maybe just showing a good example, because we all know what we could do and what we should do, but we don't do because maybe we are afraid to do, and maybe we are afraid to be the only one to start doing something better, something different. So maybe just doing small things and showing a good example for everybody else. It doesn't have to be for the environment.
No?
It can be just being a friend. I can tell my own example, because when I'm working on a gas station, and it's when I started there, we don't have a very good group, because people works on their own. We don't have bosses. So when I went there, I wanted to put us together. So I talk to people. I just say hello and ask questions and everything. And now, when I've been there almost 6 months, we talk much more, and it's a better place now, I think. So just small things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a really good example. Somebody said to me the other day, if there was one thing I would do, it would be to remind us all to think less about the self and the me, myself, I, and to think more about what my connection is to others, which is a little bit what you're saying. And I thought that's so true.
Joo, aika hienosti sanottu, eikö niin, että ei pitäisi ajatella aina itseä, mutta kaikkia, mitä sä voit ajatella toisia ihmisistä ja niin poispäin. Ja jos katsotaan vaikka Suomen yhteiskuntaa ennen, oli tämmöinen kuin talkoohenki, eikö niin? Ja talkoohenki mielestäni on semmoinen ajatus, että kaikki autamme toisimme ja olemme niin kuin tämmöinen yhteisö ja se on niin kuin tärkeää. Mutta tietysti nyt tänä päivänä meillä on hienoja autoja ja omakotitaloja ja asiat on vähän niin kuin muuttunut. Olisiko jonkun muut halusi tehdä jonkun kommentti tässä? Millä tavalla voisi saada aikaa? Monet teistä on jo saanut niin paljon aikaa. Te olette lähtenyt teidän oma kotimaasta, vaihtunut koko elämä ja tullut tänne Suomeen. Eikö tuo on jo aika iso muutos? I was just saying that many of them have already created a lot of change in their lives, affected probably other people also, by just moving from their country or fleeing from their country, original country, and coming to Finland.
Huge.
Joo. Haluatko sanoa jotain? No niin.
We could recircle here in Otavan Opisto or everyone at their home, and we should remember that someone's trash is someone other's treasure. So put things which you don't need, give it to someone else, or go to the kirpputori, whatever it is in English. Yeah.
Thank you. Good point.
Very good point. Niin, eikö se ole hieno, mitä Anna-Riikka sanoi, että pitäisi antaa, olla anteliaiseksi, niin sitä mitä et tarvitse, et voit viedä vaikka kirpputorille. Onko tuo hyvä idea, Juuso?
On hyvä idea.
Teetkö sitä?
Ei ainakaan tällä hetkellä.
Okay. He agreed with what Hanna-Riikka said and asked me if he does that, go to the flea market, give away things that he doesn't need. And he says, not yet. But maybe one day he'll do that. Yeah. Has Annuka a question? No. Nico has a question. Nico has a lot of questions.
He knows too much.
How did you? I mean, you just met on the way to Compostela. Was it like on the road like that?
Yeah.
How did you start the conversation? I mean, how did you?
This is the first night when we arrived to Spain. We were having dinner. I was just leaving the table. I had a dinner with there was an older man from Ireland, a couple from New Zealand. We were leaving the table, and this lady with grey hair jumped up from the other table, took my hand, and I said, "I heard you from Finland. I'm going there. Could you tell me about it?" I said, "I'll think about it. We'll see you tomorrow." And we met at breakfast.
In true Finnish friendly manner, he said, "Of course, no problem. I'll think about it. See you tomorrow."
We met at breakfast the next day. We had breakfast, and I also met with our dear Spanish friend Thomas, who was in one of the first photos that Dee showed. And then from that on, we walked together and cycled later for 6 weeks.
Became unlikely friends. The thing about life is you never know who you'll meet on the road.
Mulla on yksi kysymys nyt. I have a question. When you decided to change your life and fight against ecocide and create social change, what were the things that you were afraid of? I mean, the challenges that you had to overcome to do that?
Honestly, my ego. I had a big job. I was well paid. I had status. And I don't anymore have a big job. And I'm not well paid. And I don't consider myself to have status. So I was frightened of taking a really big step to follow my heart. And nearly 5 months in, I don't regret it for a moment. I would do it again.
Eli mä kysyn häneltä tämmöinen kysymys, että mikä oli ne kaikista haastavampia ja vaikeat asiat, mitä hän piti niin kuin kohdata, että hän muuttaisi omaa elämänsä, eli jättäisi kaikki hyvä työpaikkaa, hyvää statusta, hyvää palkkaa. Ja hän sanoi, että hänen oma ego, eikö niin, hänen omaa itsensä, eli hänen omaa ego sillä tavalla. Mutta what has this given you in return? Or does it have to give you anything?
No, not really. I'm not looking for anything. But what I've received is enormous kindness, food in my belly. I thought I was going to lose masses of weight. And I thought I was going to get really thin and fit. And the kindness of people has always put food on the table and beds to sleep in and interesting stories and the opportunity to connect people who would never normally meet. So, yeah.
Niin, ajatelkaa, että hän jätti sitten tämmöinen hieno työpaikka, hieno palkkaa, turvallisuutta ja mitä hän sai kenties niin kuin takaisin. No voi olla se hieno puoli meistä, eikö niin? Että ihmiset ovat hyviä, ne on anteliaita, ne on auttavaisia. Eli tämä puoli, mitä kenties emme näe aina niin kuin meidän oma elämässä. Ja hän ajatteli myöskin, että hänestä tulee hirveän laiha mutta sitten, koska hän on tavannut niin paljon ihmisiä, ne on aina tuonut ruokaa hänen pöydälle ja hän on aina ollut seura ja ruoka ja näin. So, any more questions? Yeah, Vesa.
My 2 cents about environment and almost everything. In my opinion, I think most of people are kind, but quite often they say that they don't have time. And being busy, it's sometimes like a competition. I see it like an old Monty Python joke where children cries 8 days a week and we have to eat sand and glass 30 hours per day and something like that. If we think that we don't have time for being kind and everything that we do have to have profit or purpose, it leads nothing. I just think if you open door to some old people, you don't get any money, but you give, you make he or she happy and maybe yourself.
Absolutely true. I think that's a really fair observation. And one of the things, we're all too busy, and there's nothing wrong with being too busy. And so my response to that and what I've been learning is to do what comes easily. Instead of putting yourself out of shape and doing what somebody else is doing or being like somebody else is, I think the conclusions I'm coming to on this one are do what comes easily to you. What do you find easy? Are you good on the internet? Are you good at this or are you good at that? We have a deficit thinking. In our culture, we are often trained, and education puts us often in a place where we look at what we can least do, and we say, right, we've got to work really hard at what we can't do. Not the things we need to do. There's certain basic things we need to learn. But often we go, I can't do this, so I'm going to put all my energy into learning the difficult thing. And we stop becoming brilliant at the thing we do easily. And so I would remind us all, and me, to do the things that come easily. It's quite easy for me to do this because I'm that kind of person. It wasn't a difficult, it's difficult, the journey, but the step wasn't a difficult step. So in everybody's steps, I think they should do the thing that comes easy to them. What do they do in this world that they glide at? You know, and put that to action so that it's not agony.
Okay. What do you think are some important terms that we should remember from your talk? Or concepts?
If I asked you to remember anything, it's to work as a collective, to work not in the I, but in the we. And in Finland, I would say focus on the water. It's all about your water, your greatest asset. It's not your trees or the precious minerals that people are trying to find in your land. It's the water. And do what comes easy. And finally, I have here some slips of paper. And on the top bit is the story, which is my website, which is earthrightswalker.org. And I really want to hear from people. I want to hear about your countries. I want to hear about your stories. And gradually I'm sharing those stories. So in September, they're all being uploaded, the stories I've gathered so far. And we want to know more. And we want to connect people. So we're going to work on how do we get a connecting site. And we may learn something from you guys. So hopefully that will benefit. And then below that is endecocide.eu. If there's one act of amazing strength you can do today, it would be to sign the petition in Europe where we're gathering 1 million signatures. Because one day, in Sweden and in Finland and in Norway, the environmental laws are very weak because people take it for granted that they're strong, and they're not. One day you guys might be the people who need the law of ecocide to protect your lands and your water. So that's what I'd do today, and pass it to everybody you love, everybody you care about, share it and expand it. That would be pretty cool.
Thank you very much. And you see how she connected the dots here? She connected us with her and to the whole movement and so forth. Thank you very much for a very invigorating talk.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you. I've been so honored.